In episode 79 of the Byword, Dave and I will be giving you 3 characters from each of the big 2 comic book publishers that are supremely underrated and deserve a whole lot more love. So grab your cape and cowl and activate your X gene because the Byword begins now. Greetings and salutations once more, my fellow nerds. Welcome into the Nerd Byword, the only podcast that is guaranteed to get you through the Thanksgiving hangover even better than the leftovers. We also keep our turkey properly moistened. For today's Byword Big Talk, we wanted to shed some light on some supremely underappreciated characters that deserve more love from both fans and the publishing houses in which they reside. But first, it is the customary time for Nerd News! Dave, we tried our best to fix the sequel trilogy, but it would appear that Lucasfilm is going to have the last laugh.
Well, I don't know. I need a moment first still to wrap my head around your moistened turkey. How moist do you keep your turkey, Kris? That's what I want to know right now.
As moist as possible and smothered in gravy.
I feel really weird about the word moist. I don't think I'm the only one who thinks there's something really inappropriate about this word.
2 of my sisters do as well, and I regularly send them videos just saying the word. So
now, see, that is some nerd news right there for you. The word moist will annoy your sisters. All right, well, let's talk about Star Wars for a second. You know, I've been carefully monitoring all the rumor mill around Star Wars. Now that the sequel trilogy has come to an end, there seems to be a big focus on, the Disney Plus offerings, stuff like the Book of Boba Fett, the upcoming new season of The Mandalorian, the much talked about and many, many rumors surrounding the Ben Kenobi series and of course, the Ahsoka series. So there's interesting stuff coming to Disney Plus, and yet here we stand with very, very little in the way of what is the theatrical direction of the franchise moving forward. And so, there have been rumors about several different, movie projects, and the rumor mill has been churning now that many of those are slowly being canceled away, including Patty Jenkins' much ballyhooed Rogue Squadron. So if that is really truly the case, where do we stand with the future of Star Wars on the big screen? Well, apparently, if you kind of dig through some of the statements being made by actors involved in the sequel trilogy, maybe we'll get a sequel trilogy, or at least some spin-offs perhaps that are character specific. I'm pulling here several different things together, but first, there was, of course, an interview with John Boyega in 2020 on Jake's Takes, where Boyega spoke about how he would be open to returning to Star Wars. And here's the quote: "Whichever way, I'm open to the conversation, as long as it's Kathleen Kennedy, JJ, as in JJ Abrams, and maybe someone else in the team. It's a no-brainer." So Boyega has expressed interest already last year in possibly returning. This is interesting in light of the fact that very recently, as in just a couple of days ago, we heard that Adam Driver, Kylo Ren himself, even though his character met an untimely or timely fate, I mean, it really depends on how you feel about the character, is also open to returning to future Star Wars projects. And so here is the quote from him from Unilad. "No, I'm not totally against it. For me, it's a filmmaker's medium, so my only thing is working with great filmmakers. Whatever the size, it's never been interesting to me to an extent. There's interesting things about working on both. I always just follow people I'd be interested in working with and whether I'd be right for the part, things like that." So no, definitely not averse, and that's not averse to returning to Star Wars. So with those kinds of statements out there in the nerd sphere, obviously there are some questions. Could we perhaps be getting a Kylo Ren sort of prequel, sort of the story of how he fell? Could we get a sequel that focuses on John Boyega and his character? Like, what exactly is the future direction of Star Wars on the big screen, and could we be getting more from the characters from the sequel trilogy? I guess only time will tell, but the actors at the very least seem to be, if not interested, then definitely not averse to at least talking about returning to their roles. So what do you think, Chris?
I think I tweeted this out, but if it's not Finn's continuing story and the redemption on the side of how badly they mistreated that character and John Boyega, I don't want it. So if John Boyega is willing to come back after his character was just tossed away like that, if he's willing to do that, then I'm all in. I don't know that I'm very interested in any more Kylo Ren content. I think we have completely squeezed everything out of that sponge, but I am absolutely here for any new Finn content.
You know, and I really do wonder that they talk so much about how the sequel trilogy wrapped up what they called the quote-unquote Skywalker saga. So, okay, we put a pin in that whole family, but where do you go from here? You know, obviously, whatever you do next cannot be as nostalgia fueled, because you can't rely on the original trilogy nostalgia and the original actors coming back and all that. So what do you do? Do you move forward into the future? You know, do you move back into the past and try to do something Old Republic? If you had the choice of really like anything for the direction of Star Wars, Chris, where do you think it should go next as far as what they're showing on the big screen?
My mantra is always forward, never backward. I was left with a little bit of a dangling with, as laborious as the Rise of Skywalker was, that hint of Finn being force sensitive as well. So I would be happy to pick that up with Finn's character and spinning out of that. My only reservation of that is, I think Rey's story has been all the way told, and like I said, Kylo. I don't think there's anything else there. Um, the Old Republic and seeing the Jedi in their heyday, and not like their immediate downfall, and then gone to waste of space. That might be fun, but aside from that, I'm not really sure. I'd like some new uncharted territory and not going all the way backwards.
See, I feel very similar. A lot of fans seem to be clamoring for some kind of Old Republic movie. And I don't know if that's necessarily the right thing. I think Star Wars, on the big screen at least, is going to have to go through some kind of radical reinvention.
Yeah.
It's going to have to find something new to say, because like I said, you can't really rely on nostalgia fuel anymore at this point. It's time for something new. All right, Chris, what do you've got this week? It seems like we're going to be talking about award-winning directors having a bad day.
Yeah. Well, it would appear that legendary director Ridley Scott is fully leaning into the old man yelling at clouds stereotype, blaming his latest box office flop, The Last Duel, on the current generation and their presumed addiction to technology. Talking with Mark Maron on the WTF podcast, Scott said, quote, "Disney did a fantastic promotion job. The bosses loved the movie. I was concerned it was not for them. I think what it boils down to, what we've got today are the audiences who were brought up on these effing cell phones. The millennium do not ever want to be taught anything unless you're told it on a cell phone," end quote. So this comes after he pulled the token Hollywood elitist move, looking at you, Martin Scorsese, of taking a rather large doo-doo on the current trend of superhero films, saying that they have effing terrible scripts and all of this. So The Last Duel is a film that's set in the Middle Ages that stars, believe it or not, Matt Damon and Ben Affleck. Not something that you would just usually group together. I don't get medieval Knight's Tale from the Bros from Boston. So maybe that has something to do with it. Also knew nothing about this movie, so he says that they did a fantastic promotion job. I heard nothing about it until it made headlines that it flopped. So um, it's and the reason I put this in nerd news is because mostly of the dumping on superhero movies, and it just seems like, and this is a legendary director who's done sci-fi stuff like Blade Runner, the Alien movies, who, like, it seems like the current trends and what's popular has just passed him by, and it's just fascinating to me. Instead of paying homage to people who are being successful and maybe evolving and with the times, it's being immovable object and stuck in their ways. So that's a fascinating trend to me, as someone who has made big name sci-fi fantasy type films and then casting aspersions of something that is not completely out of left field in comparison.
Yeah, this is such an interesting case in a lot of ways to me, Kris. It's exactly as you said. Here is somebody who has been a genre filmmaker, and at this point maybe buying a little bit into his own hype as an auteur, and doesn't really, I guess, associate with his roots anymore, and feels a little bit like maybe he is above it all, or those things are beneath him. I don't know. I think, though, it would be a mistake as a nerd to completely dismiss some of the things he says. Or even, directors in general. There is one thing to be said for sure. Everybody has seen a metric crap ton of stuff, promotionally speaking, about stuff like The Eternals or stuff like Spider-Man Far From Home. But have we seen really a lot of promotion for this last duel? I don't think we have, and I think that very much shows where the priority of the corporate overlords lay, and that is that right now superhero fare is popular, is big bucks, and that is where the resources are going. That's where the promotional dollars are going, and some movies may, yes, get a short shift from that. And I don't think we should dismiss it out of hand, because I'm old enough to remember being a nerd and being in a drought of nerdy content beyond the comic books. I mean, getting a good cartoon was a good day. So this wheel of Hollywood's favor that is currently shining on superhero movies is probably not going to shine there forever, and eventually we're probably going to see sort of an inversion again. And we could very well be in a position where the content that we love so much, and that is currently making billions of dollars, ends up being in the same spot as The Last Duel, under-promoted, shunted aside. Nobody knows about it. Nobody gives it a chance, because there is a different new trend. There's a new popular kid in town. As far as the cell phone thing, that's just another content delivery mechanism. I think the only thing, and I think you could probably agree with this to some extent with me, since we're both in the education field, the only thing that I have noticed specifically about, the influence of cell phones on consumers is that I think there's a much, much shorter attention span.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, TikTok, you have these 5 to 10 second videos or whatever. They deliver fast, and so sitting down and watching a 2-hour movie is maybe not the thing that this generation really wants to sink its teeth into. There is something to be said for that kind of filmmaking, and something that's a little more meticulous and takes its time and isn't boom boom boom, very flashy sort of special effects heavy filmmaking. And I'm sure that's kind of what The Last Duel ended up being in some respects. And so it's definitely not for the shorter attention span crowd. So that is certainly a problem when it comes to media consumption and stuff. But ultimately, man, it's Ridley Scott. I can't ignore the guy completely, even though it feels like you said, he's just an old man yelling, get off my lawn or something. To a certain extent, this is a guy who has, made genre movies that were critical darlings, and now he's making movies, and the wheel has turned. And I know there's a part of me that sees it coming, and I dread the day when the wheel turns again. and maybe being a nerd isn't a hip thing anymore. I mean, I lived it once, and I would not be surprised if we come back around to that. So that's my random rambling musings on Ridley Scott's comments, Kris.
One thing that just popped into my head is when he talks about, promotional stuff, he does have another film that is currently out, The House of Gucci, and that has been advertised out of the wazoo. I mean, with names like Lady Gaga, Adam Driver, Al Pacino, you're going to get advertising from that. And that has not been so well received. So maybe there's a connective link here, and maybe there's something that maybe he would want to re-examine. But I think you hit the nail on the head when it comes to attention span. I think, for example, if there's any Wi-Fi issues for like our kids' stuff, and it takes more than 5 seconds to load a web page, they're ready to toss the computer across the room. So yeah. And it's to the point now where, like, for example, our lectures and stuff, if we're not constantly changing, if we do a traditional lecture for more than 10 minutes, they're completely lost. So yeah, I think I definitely agree with you that attention wise.
And that is eventually going to affect, cinema. I mean, we can already see that with stuff like the Transformers movies, which I am not a big fan of. I think qualitatively they are very much in the vein of what Ridley Scott is talking about with superhero movies, which is that the scripts are very, very bad. The stories are unsubstantial. But things go boom in very quick succession. You never have a 10-minute beat without a big boom. And that seems to be very much the filmmaking that we're getting for the low attention span generation that we have brought up now. And that is regrettable. I will say that is regrettable because, the kind of filmmaking that takes its time and doesn't feel constrained to action beats every few minutes just to keep people's attention. That kind of filmmaking has value as well, and I don't want that to get lost. Some of my all-time favorite movies, have no action beats. So I don't want that kind of filmmaking to get lost due to let's call it the iPhone generation, if you will.
Yeah, I will say that I think the one kind of outlier in that regard are like true emotional connections. Like, I've seen some people criticize the Eternals for being too long and not as action-packed as other superhero films. But the one thing that a lot of people are gravitating towards, and this is just one example, are the emotional connections that they have with the characters. So I think that is one thing that if you're going to not go as action heavy, if you can make an emotional connection with your audiences, I think that's the way to go.
Yeah, I will agree with that.
All right, that wraps up Nerd News. What are your thoughts on the stories that we brought today? Be sure to hit us up on social media at NerdByword with your thoughts as well. When we come back from this, our first break, we're going to hit you with our Byword Big Talk characters that need to be featured ASAP. Welcome back to today's post-Thanksgiving meat and potatoes segment. You know it as the Byword Big Talk. And in today's episode, Dave and I, we've really been focusing on characters that are underrepresented, that are kind of diamonds in the rough, that we feel don't get enough love, both from fans and from the publishing houses in which they reside. So we each picked 3 characters from both of the big two, Dave, DC, myself, Marvel, that we think need some more love ASAP. So Dave, who is your first pick for a character that needs more love?
I want to give all my love to Ralph Dibny, the Elongated Man. Now, I will say, this sort of rant is more comic book related and sort of independent of the fact that the character actually made some significant appearances on the Flash television show, although that has gone notoriously bad due to some comments made by the actor involved. But I have mad love for the Elongated Man, and I think he kind of stands in the shadows of the very funny, very over the top Plastic Man. Because they have, similar stretchy kind of powers. But the cool thing about the Elongated Man is that he popped up initially in The Flash, number 112, back in 1960, as a supporting character in the Flash book. He ended up sort of then spinning off into a solo backup feature in Detective Comics, which is really my jam. This is sort of the best version of the character to me. He kind of became a detective who's just totally, into odd mysteries, and he travels across the United States in a convertible with his wife, Sue Dibny. He's constantly looking for these mysteries and trying to solve them. And is sort of just a really, really cool, offbeat detective character. And of course, things, progressed for him. He ended up being in the Justice League for some years. And then, Brad Meltzer's Identity Crisis came along, where they killed off his wife, Sue, in an absolutely horrible way. The character kind of went adrift, popped up in one of the absolute masterpieces of DC Comics, 52, where he was sort of investigating, trying to find a way to bring his wife back, and ultimately lost his life trapping the sorcerer Felix Faust and DC's version of the devil, Neron, in this tower, sort of giving his life to trap those guys. And from that point, sort of the last shot we got in 52 was him and his wife as ghosts reunited, and he says, "I smell a mystery." And it's just that's the moment, right? I mean, if you're going to have the Elongated Man dead, then that's the series. And it never went anywhere really, but that would have been the thing. Ralph and Sue Dibny, ghost detectives. I mean, I was waiting for it back after 52, and nobody ever touched it. The cool thing to me about the Elongated Man is that he is sort of a character in the vein of something like Columbo, a detective, but sort of quirky, sort of offbeat, like back when the USA Network had this whole character thing going on, where all their shows were quirky detectives and stuff, like Psych, for example. I think the Elongated Man fits perfectly into the genre of sort of offbeat detective. And just having a series of him and his wife solving these really bizarre, weird mysteries across the DC universe, sort of ground level, behind the scenes stuff that, the Justice League, the Supermans and the Batmans would never deal with. Just really odd that happens, in DC Comics, and have them solving those kinds of mysteries. Dude, I want that series. I've been waiting for that series for years. Somebody do the series, Chris.
I know, that I'm not telling the truth. Man, I love Psych. I love it so much. Oh my God.
Psych is the stuff. We need to just have a Psych episode, because I have watched that whole show 4 times straight through.
We kind of have that dynamic. You're very Gus.
I'm Gus?
Are you?
Really?
I don't know.
Now I feel gussy.
I feel like I would take advantage of your credit card and your car if we were to team up like that. No,
you know what? You probably would. Yes.
I'm the emoter, and you're the structured, logic-based one. Very Kirk and Spock-esque.
Yeah, that feels accurate. So I have to ask, Chris, would you buy a sort of Columbo-ish inspired
yeah, that was the
story?
You said Columbo, and I just had one more question. No, yeah, it's perfect, man. I'm sold on this. So, other than 52, that seemed to be the ringing reading guide endorsement. Any other particular things that you would recommend folks read?
Oh, just, the old backups in Detective Comics, any way you can, get a chance to read those, they were a good deal of fun for the time period. I mean, once they took him out of that, he has good moments and, stuff like formerly known as the Justice League, or I Can't Believe It's Not the Justice League, or even his appearances in the Justice League series. And he popped up sporadically from from the 70s to the 90s. I think that's all fine, but I think the Elongated Man at his very best is those Detective Comics backups. and then the stuff he did in 52. I mean, he outsmarted the devil, man. It is so sweet how that whole storyline came together. He's just such an underrated, fantastic detective. I think he could give somebody like, Batman a run for his money as far as detective skills in the comics, but he gets zero respect for it, and it's an absolute shame.
Get no respect.
That's a fact. All right, Chris, what is your first Marvel character that needs some love?
Well, it's in the name, Blue Marvel. I'm talking Dr. Adam Bashir. Now, guys, I am wrapping up a masterpiece that is known as the Al Ewing Marvel read through, and it's going to be a nerd commendation. I'm a completionist, so I don't want to nerd commend it until I finish it all the way. But Dr. Adam Bashir is one of the most fascinating characters in all the Marvel universe, and is barely known to most people. There was some speculation he was going to pop up in WandaVision due to his connections with Monica Rambeau. They are a romantic pair in most of the iterations of the character. Power set wise, just a fascinating character. He has antimatter energy absorption. If you're talking power scales, it's on the same level of, the most cosmic beings, one of the most powerful beings in all of the Marvel universe. Got superhuman strength, flight, antimatter manipulation, concussive force blast, energy pulse, super genius intelligence, probably the smartest person in the entire Marvel universe. And most of the, common spectators of, Marvel content don't know who this guy is. So, if you have not read Al Ewing's Ultimates and Ultimates 2, I highly recommend it. One of the most fascinating characters, simply because of his character history as well. Is very advanced in age. He was around for like the 30s, 40s, and 50s, like the civil rights era. So he's got an extremely long lifespan, that is coupled with his power set, and just going through all of those things with the civil rights movement, being a black superhero, and dealing with discrimination, like with all this power and still being mistreated, is just a fascinating thing to develop. He was friends with Luke Cage's father. That'll give you an additional timeline, but as far as reading recommendations go read Ultimates and Ultimates 2 by Al Ewing. Also, he pops up in Ewing's Secret Avengers, but again, once I finish this Al Ewing read through, I'll do a full breakdown of all this. But yeah, Dr. Adam Bashir, hopefully he'll pop up in the MCU, and that'll give him some more love. But I'm a massive fan, and probably the most underrated character in all of Marvel Comics.
Now, see, I have to ask. You said Ultimates. See, I'm an adherent of the old Marvel Ultimate Universe, Ultimate Spider-Man, and all that. And so the Ultimates to me are basically like their version of the Avengers.
Right.
What is this like? This is kind of a different Ultimates, or what?
Yeah, this is a 616 proper team of like the best of the best. Like it's almost like it's very similar to the Illuminati, of like this kind of secret band of superheroes that typically deal in the most cosmic level threats. So the team is comprised of Blue Marvel, Carol Danvers, T'Challa, America Chavez. I'm trying to think if I'm missing anybody else. I'm pulling it up as we speak. Ultimates by Al Ewing. But yes, so it does bear some resemblances with and Monica Rambeau, of course. So yeah, that's the team. Captain Marvel, Carol Danvers, Monica Rambeau, Spectrum, T'Challa, Black Panther, Blue Marvel, Dr. Adam Bashir, and then America Chavez. And they deal with the most cosmic level, universe threatening events. They take on the first volume, they take on Galactus himself. So they deal with the biggest and the baddest of the threats to the universe. So yeah, and not to mention the art by Kenneth Roquefort is just absolutely stunning, mesmerizing. So yeah, the Ultimates by Al Ewing, if nothing else, is just like some of the coolest and most diverse superheroes that just get to flex. So I absolutely love it. But yes, it is. It is an homage to the Ultimate Universe, and there is a little bit of Easter eggs and connections in there for what you're referencing as well, Dave.
Now, see, that just makes me happy because I do miss the old Ultimate line quite a bit. But yeah, I had no idea about this Blue Marvel character, and I'll freely admit, I'm a novice when it comes to some of the more obscure characters. But you totally sold me on the guy. I'm very curious to see more now.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, Dave. Your next one is a question?
Yeah, it's the question, as it turns out. So, I'm going to have to dig deep into my bag of tricks, but you're going to hear a couple of names at least that I think, are going to mean something to you. Like, for example, one Steve Ditko. I do believe you have some passing familiarity with the guy.
Yeah, I've heard of the guy.
Yeah, it turns out that he's actually the creator of The Question. The Question first appeared in Charlton Comics Blue Beetle #1 back in June of 1967. Of course, the Charlton characters were bought up by DC in the early 80s, and so many of those characters, including The Question, were sort of incorporated into the larger DC universe. The Question is basically the blueprint on which the Watchmen character Rorschach is based. At the time that Watchmen was being pitched, it was pitched as using the Charlton characters. But that was ultimately rejected by DC Comics, and so these analogs were created. So, The Question looks pretty much how you would imagine him to look. He's got this weird face. Basically, he's faceless. He has this mask on that makes him look like he has no face. He's wearing a very traditional sort of detective getup with a fedora and all that. And he's just, a detective. He had an absolutely fantastic series in the late 80s that was really, really good. But since then, it's been kind of all over the place with him. Rather than being, the street level faceless detective, they started doing some very odd things with him. One of my favorite things they did with him actually goes back to, once again, the miniseries 52, for which I have mad love. During that time, The Question, Vic Sage, was not doing so hot. Was feeling like he was going to die, and he took on a protege, Renee Montoya, a former cop with the Gotham City Police Department. And throughout the story, he basically passed the mantle of being The Question on to Renee Montoya. And that was absolutely fantastic version of the character. Renee Montoya made a wonderful Question. But then, of course, all good things had to come to an end thanks to the New 52 relaunch. At that point, they decided to make Vic Sage some kind of mystical thing, entity, weird, I don't even know. And then DC Rebirth has brought him back sort of more to his traditional iteration. And I think there's even like a series that just wrapped up, or is getting ready to wrap up, called The Deaths of Vic Sage. But man, this is such a great character. And the high point to me through all of this is, what 52 did with him. This relationship with Renee Montoya, this character that he kind of, bounced off of really, really well. This disillusioned cop, and he takes her under his wing and kind of trains her to be his successor. So the way Ditko kind of developed the character, he was an adherent to like, what's that philosophy called? Objectivism. Which is kind of what he acted like early
the
on.
Ayn Rand, yeah. Randism,
yes,
yeah.
But it's much more interesting what they did to him later when DC had him, because he kind of became like this, almost like this Zen figure. He was very like, very Zen as a character, which, just fantastic to bounce him off of this very angry, disillusioned cop. Just really, really cool, interactions between those two. So I would pay good money for that series, to just bring that dynamic back and have Vic Sage take on, Renee Montoya as a protege, and instead of having it as like a subplot in a major like series like 52, just hit that as a solo Question series. You could call it The Questions with an S. And you could have a really, really cool series as, Vic Sage slowly tries to pass the mantle on to Renee Montoya and train her to take his place. I would totally be there for a series like that, Chris.
Yeah, that's fascinating. And I think we just have like detective interest. It's in our bloodstream at this point. So anytime you get like a procedural like type stuff like this, like we talked Columbo and stuff like that, I'm absolutely here for it.
And the question is a fantastic visual, and I still think it's the superior visual to Rorschach. I think the idea of like this faceless guy popping up in the dark and questioning you, like no eyes, no mouth, no nose, like it'll scare the crap out of you. He has this really, really cool look about him. He's just an iconic character, and definitely not treated like an iconic character oftentimes at DC. It's an absolute shame. All right, Kris, who is the second character that you believe needs some mad love?
Well, I'm going back to the well of Al Ewing again. I'm telling you guys, when I finish this run, it's going to be the nerd commendation to end all nerd commendations. But I'm going the White Tiger, Ava Ayala. Now, this is a legacy character that has changed hands. Multiple characters have held the mantle of the White Tiger, but I'm talking specifically of Ava Ayala, who took the mantle from her niece, Angela del Toro. Her family is murdered by Gideon Mace, and then she takes on this amulet of the ancient tiger god. So like there's this mythos attached to the character that garners her power. It's just really fascinating. She showed up in the Ultimate Spider-Man cartoon a little bit and was super fun, but I'm talking specifically of Ewing's Mighty Avengers and New Avengers. Just absolutely fascinating character. Like there's one issue of Mighty Avengers, I want to say it's issue 7 or 8, where she goes into the amulet or something to that effect and battles the tiger god and masters it, and that's one of the standout issues for me. But just a really, really fascinating character, very street level, Daredevil-esque type of character. She is linked romantically with Victor Alvarez, the new Power Man, who took over that moniker after Luke Cage. Very street level, and it's just a fascinating character. There's not nearly enough Latinx representation in comics, I think, at large. We've got a few that we go to, like America Chavez and Jaime Reyes' Blue Beetle. But I think that, to be completely honest, Latinx characters and their representation are sorely lacking in mainstream comics. And, with something like Marvel Voices Comunidades coming out, I'm very, very excited about that, to get the spotlight on those characters. So I'm a huge Ava Ayala fan, and particularly those Ewing runs of New Avengers and Mighty Avengers are highly recommended. And I just want to see more of that character, because she has not really been popping up for the last couple of years of publication. So I'm a huge fan, and I need more Ava Ayala.
Now, see, here's another character that I knew absolutely nothing about, and you've already got me very interested. It seems to me like the more we talk here, I'm going to definitely have to do more Al Ewing. I've already been doing Immortal Hulk, but apparently I'm going to have to go deeper into
That's where
this
I'm
man's Marvel
That's
career.
where I'm at. Yep.
Yeah, man, we can talk about Immortal Hulk one day too when you're done with it. That sucker is something special.
All right, Dave. You got a funny one for the last one.
I see what you did there. Look, it would not be a Dave recommendation if there wasn't at least some kind of really odd, strange, deep cut character that has made like almost no appearances, or is just generally perceived to be a one-off or a joke or something. And dude, I'm gonna tell you, I have to talk about the Jokester a little bit. Not the Joker, or the Jokester. The Jokester is the Earth 3 version of the Joker, and it's the arch nemesis of Owlman, that Earth's analog of Batman. Owlman, of course, is a bad guy. His sidekick isn't Robin, it's Talon. And so naturally, it made sense for that Earth's Joker, the Jokester, to be a hero. So here we have the Clown Prince of Crime reinvented as a good guy. And I'm going to tell you, man, this particular character really did it for me. I loved 52, as I've mentioned now twice already, and there was a sequel of sorts to 52, another 52 issue series called Countdown, and it was everything that the 52 was not. Countdown was bad. It was bad. it just didn't work on about 40 different levels. Let me rephrase that. It didn't work on 52 different levels, one level for each issue. But there was one wonderful, wonderful special where, you had a group of characters traveling through the multiverse, and they come across Earth 3 and they encounter the Jokester, and everything in this man's appearance worked. His relationship with Three-Face, yes, Three-Face, the fact that he has a daughter called the Jokester's daughter, Duella Dent, everything just worked. And then the very next issue, they just immediately killed this character off. And, I would love to see a mini-series or even an ongoing set on Earth 3, where you have, all these superhero analogs that are actually villains, like Owlman. And then go ahead and, build sort of their version of the Justice League, taking on these good guys, but they're all, hero versions of villains led by the Jokester. Man, I would read the crap out of that series, just because that one appearance of the Jokester completely hit. It was great from start to finish. His interactions with other characters, his rivalry with Owlman, just seeing that biting wit that the Joker usually throws at people coming out of a good guy is absolutely fascinating. And I would so be there for a series like that. There is such an obsession with Batman related characters and stuff. So if you're going to play that game and just do DC Comics, nothing but Batman or something, at least give us an alternate version of the Joker. I don't think the Joker himself needs a series, but the Jokester, man, I'm there for that, Chris.
Yeah, you weren't kidding with your deep cuts here, man. This is fascinating. I'm always been a huge fan of alt universes, and and then I think that you touched on this before, is if we have an established history with those characters and understanding, because and I think this goes all the way back to our conversation with John Jackson Miller of these focal points in a character's history, at the proverbial fork in the road. Where did it go from here versus here, and how did we get to this end point? And I think that's just something fascinating to tackle, and even not being as well versed as I'd like to be in the DC universe, I obviously know the Joker, but so seeing a different spin on this type of character is just fascinating. Something that one of the most famous, infamous characters truly of comics being on the side of the light is just a fascinating thing to even think about.
And even to take this a step further, can you then imagine a multiversal crossover where the Jokester meets the Joker?
Yeah.
Or where the Jokester meets Batman? The gold interactions you could get out of that. I could not believe they killed off the Jokester before he got to interact with Batman in some way. Never happened. Such a shame, such a missed opportunity.
Yeah, that's just a loss.
Yeah, that stuff just writes itself, man. All right, Chris, your final character from Marvel that needs some love.
Well, it wouldn't be a Chris, free choice episode, what have you, without a mutant being represented. So, I'm talking about Oya, whose birth name is Ije Okonkwo, from Nigeria, and one of the recent creations, one of the most recent mutants, coming after the turn of the century, with the mutant Messiah complex with Hope Summers. And Edie is a 14-year-old living in her village in Africa, and truly is a fascinating character because her power set is the ability to control the temperature around her. She can raise the temperature a la heat and fire, or dramatically lower the temperature. So similar to Iceman's powers, very similar power set to something like Todoroki of My Hero Academia. And a lot of folks claim that they are inspired by one another or something of that effect. But she's truly fascinating because when her mutant powers activate, she accidentally burns down her entire village and is, of course, traumatized by this. And that lays into her whole backstory. She's also a very, very religious Christian woman. And, with her mutant power causing the damage that it did. She internalizes that and sees herself as this demonic entity. And so, like, if you go to the metaphor of, that is very in line with people who are raised in a religious, background, but, come to the discovery that they are of the LGBTQ community, and then battling those inner demons. It's a really, really fascinating development. A really great one of my favorite things about Jason Aaron's Wolverine and the X-Men, which I mostly enjoyed, about 80 to 85% of it. When you have Logan and Storm hooking up, that is absolute trash and should never be done. Like,
Boo.
Lame, super lame. But one of my favorite things about that run is EDA's character development. The way that she puts Quentin Quire in his place. Kid Omega is trash and needs to be put in check, and she regularly did that, even if they did kind of date. That was weird, but teenagers are going to teenager. And then just watching her development of self-acceptance and, just character growth, especially having a mentor like Logan, who's lived for centuries and dealt with like that internal conflict of being this man, this monster, and stuff like that. So that's a fascinating thing to develop. And she has completely gone off the grid after Schism and all of that. She hasn't really shown up other than like one or two panels in the Krakoa era. So that was really, really disappointing. She's Catholic, excuse me, so specifically Catholic. And that's always a fascinating thing to dive into. With characters like Daredevil and just the juxtaposition of your actions versus your faith, and that's always something interesting to look at with superpowered individuals. But I'm really disappointed that she hasn't shown up a lot more in the Krakoa era, in this era of this new age for mutantdom and kind of a paradigm shift. I don't liken it to a utopia because there are still difficulties with nation building. With something like we saw in Ta-Nehisi Coates' Black Panther, and I think we've discussed previously. Just because you finally have solemnity, you don't necessarily have utopia. There's still a lot of heavy lifting done here, but I would like to see what this character can do now that she doesn't have to fear for her life just because she's born differently, or what's she doing now. And we haven't seen her exclusively in a couple years, and I need more Oya.
Yeah, this is a character I have never heard before, so for me this is about as deep of a cut as the Jokester. And I have to say, I'm surprised that this character hasn't popped up in the Krakoa era. Now, obviously, I have a long documented awkward history with the Krakoa era. I keep trying to get into it, and it never quite works for me. But this character is fascinating enough. I'm actually shocked that this character hasn't gotten like a mini series or a one shot or something. Because there's definitely something here. Like I would be interested in reading more about Oya.
All right, those are our 6 characters that need more love immediately from both of the big two. Who do you think that we missed out on our list? Send us your names, your recommendations for characters that need more love ASAP at Nerd Byword on Twitter and Instagram. When we come back from this, our final break, it is time for our patented nerd commendations. Stick around. All right, welcome back to our final segment. You know it as Dave. It's very rare that we both have a DC recommendation, but here we are.
Yeah, but you're cheating. I mean, you're going to be talking about Stephanie Williams. I mean, let's be honest. We would follow we would follow Stephanie no matter which publisher she was at.
When you're right, you're right.
Yeah, so my recommendation this week is the current ongoing Robin series written by Joshua Williamson with art by Gleb Melnikov. This one kind of took me by surprise. I didn't really have a lot of expectations of what they could do with a Robin series. I've read a lot of Robin. I read a lot of the original Chuck Dixon run, for example. So whenever there's been a Robin solo, I read it, and this one I have to say is really top notch. So in the story going on right now, and I believe it just hit issue 7 this past week, Damian Wayne is forced to find his own path as Robin away from both sides of his family, from Bruce Wayne and from Talia al Ghul, the daughter, of course, of the Al Ghul who shall forevermore be mispronounced by everybody. You see how I dodged that, right?
Raish, Roz, I've heard both.
Yeah, he goes both ways. Let's put it that way. So in this particular story, he learns of a tournament called the League of Lazarus Tournament. And he decides to enter this tournament in an attempt to win it and to unravel the secrets of the island where all this is happening. And the way it's set up is that all the fights in this tournament are to the death, and you can die and be resurrected 3 times. So basically you have 3 lives, but your final life, if you die on this island, you're dead. And it's just really, really interestingly structured how he tries to investigate what's going on this island. Gets tested, with all these different one-on-one fights. It reintroduces some very, very cool characters that we've not seen in a while, such as Ravager, Rose Wilson, who has a long history with, the Teen Titans, both as a member and an enemy. It reintroduces Green Arrow's son, Connor Hawke, in this series as well as one of the enemy combatants who's been basically raised by the bad guys. And it also introduces some interesting new characters, such as Flatline, who seems to be a bit of a love interest for Damian Wayne. So Damian is kind of really hard to get right in my book. I think, obviously Grant Morrison, who created the character, has probably the best handle on him. But, he can be an incredibly abrasive character, which he should be. I mean, he's Damian Wayne. But if you don't write him with a certain degree of heart as well, then he just comes across as a jerk, and nobody really wants to read about this particular jerk. But man, I have to say, Joshua Williamson, really, he's hitting it. Like, the voice of Damian is pretty much spot on here. The story is interesting. You really like where it's going. The action is really good. The art really, really sings. Gleb Melnikov is doing just a fantastic job on the art. And so I'm just happy with this book altogether, both as a longtime DC fan, seeing some old familiar faces pop up again. Man, Connor Hawke was Green Arrow for a long time and was, of course, Green Arrow in my favorite Justice League series, JLA by Grant Morrison. So seeing him again is just like a real, pleasure. So this series is just really, really fun from top to bottom, Chris.
Yeah, this has been on my to-read list for a long time, and one of my go-to DC characters, even in my limited exposure, is Damian Wayne, because there's just something about that character that fascinates me. I always have gravitated towards that person of two worlds, if you will, like his heritage being the child of both Bruce Wayne and Talia al Ghul, and having this internal obligation to his father and his mother's side of the family and the League of Assassins, and all of that has just always been fascinating to me. I think he's the most complex Robin, at least in my experience, and just the most interesting one. And with Bruce having all of these surrogate sons, to have his actual son, I think that adds on another layer of fascination for me. So it's been in my to read pile for quite some time, but I'm gonna have to get my butt in gear.
Yeah, I would say so. Get your butt in gear, Chris, because this one is really not to be missed. It's just such a fun book.
I'm also basking in the glory of Immortal Hulk, so.
Well, there is a lot of glory to bask in on that series, I'll tell you that. All right, Chris, so what is your nerd commendation this week?
Well, you tipped it a little bit ago, but this is a Stephanie Williams and Vida Ayala Stan podcast, and love both of them and love the work that they're doing on Newbie and the Amazons. So we had, our extensive sit down with Stephanie before the book came out. We are now 2 issues deep, and I could not be happier with it. It's so fascinating, and it's an area of the DC universe that I am embarrassingly noob-y on. Oh, that was a pun. Yeah. So I know nothing about the Wonder Woman world. I know nothing about Themyscira, other than there's only women there. And the art on the series, I neglect to mention, is done by Aletha E. Martinez, and is one of my favorite artists in the game right now. And the artwork on this series is absolutely breathtaking. It's so effervescent. It feels like you're there on Themyscira, even though, Dave, we're not allowed. It is absolutely fascinating. And so basically what happens, this takes place after the events of Infinite Frontier, and Nubia is now the queen of Themyscira. And I think for me, the most fascinating thing about this book is the same thing that fascinates me about what Donny Cates is doing on Thor. Is after all these years, centuries of being a warrior and just being, as Cates puts it in Thor, the hammer of Asgard, or in Nubia's case, like this guardian of Themyscira and Doom's doorway. Now you're in this place of leadership, and you are now in charge of everything. And just how do you tussle with that new leadership role, and not just a leadership role, but the leadership role? And I think that's the most fascinating thing to me, not to mention the Well of Souls being brought back into play, and a large number of new Amazons are coming through this Well of Souls, but something sinister has creeped its way into Themyscira as well. Not to mention the first trans woman Amazon in Bia is fascinating, and just wonderful representation. There's so much to love about this series, from the art to the dialogue, the storytelling. It's issue 2 has a beautiful interaction between Nubia and the goddesses. It's just a fascinating series, and I cannot wait for more.
To my great shame, and I will freely admit this, Chris, I have not been able to read the first 2 issues of Nubia and the Amazons yet.
Shame.
Yeah,
shame.
I will go stand in a corner right now. I'm so excited to start reading this. I actually am a little bit versed in the world of Wonder Woman, one of my favorite characters, period. And so seeing this exploration of the Amazons from a different perspective is something I've been looking forward to for a while. So I'm going to go stand in a corner in shame until I finally get a hold of these first 2 issues, all right?
Yeah, not to mention some of the most glorious cover art, variant covers and main covers that we've seen in comics, between the Sway covers, the Sozo covers. Absolutely breathtaking.
Yeah, I'm just really excited to get into this thing.
All right, that wraps up episode 79. It's been 79 weeks, Dave. 79. 79 of the Nerd Byword podcast. We thank you so much for listening and humoring us nerds. Please be sure to like, subscribe, follow, rate, review on your favorite podcasting platform, whether that is Apple Podcasts, Spotify, TuneIn Radio app, Amazon, or nerdbyword.com.
And of course, find us on social media. We would love to hear more from you. How do you feel about our episode? Do you think we're doing all right? What are some things that we can improve? You can find us on Twitter and Instagram at Nerd Byword, and individually at that nerd Chris and at that nerd Dave.
Yeah, not a nurse though.
Nurse Dave.
Hey. And as always, stay well and stay nerdy, my friends.
The Nerd Byword is written and produced by Kris and Dave, 2 nerds with a love of all things pop culture. The podcast features music by Al Jimenez, with additional drops composed by Joe Biondi. Our show art is by Ashery Design. Find us at nerdbyword.com and wherever podcasts are available.